session of My Journey, My Roots. My name is Harbhajan Gill, President of Komagata Maru Heritage Foundation and past President of Pacific Canada Heritage Center, a Museum of Migration. And here we are discussing today exactly what happened with the Komagata Maru ship that came over in Vancouver Broad Inlet over 110 years ago. Actually, 110 years ago today. On the ship, there were 376 passengers. They included Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus. All these 376 passengers were British citizens, or British was the rule at the time over India and Pakistan. Currently, that is India and Pakistan. At that time, it was just India. And these people, 376 people, had the right to come to Canada, and they were by law British citizens, and Canada was a British colony. So by law they had the right to come here, but the government of Canada decided not to let them land here in Vancouver on May 23rd, 1914. So their journey that actually started on April 4th from Hong Kong on April 4th, and it took them that long and reached here in Vancouver May 23rd. They were stuck here for 2 months until July 23rd, 1914. So for 2 months they fought a legal battle. Obviously the Canadian government did not want them to land. There were reasons behind that purpose. It's in details, it would be a long story, but at that time there was World War I happening, and because of that, the passengers that came from on the ship, they were from 121 villages. So 376 people came from 121 villages from across India, currently Pakistan and India. So out of those people, same 121 villages also had 187,000 people who were ready to fight for the war, World War I, which was for British rule. So the British people, British rule, British Raj was afraid if the people in those 121 villages find out that these people are denied entry, when they go back, they would tell all those people that, hey, let's not go for the war because this is how the British Raj is treating you. So because of that, when they went back to India on September 26th, 1914, they were put in jail and they were killed. There was a riot, and they were not able to go to their villages, 121 villages, back in 1914. So that is the story behind the story. But what happened here in Vancouver was Canadian government did not allow them to have proper food. So there was a Gurdwara committee that actually provided them food, and so from that point, there were 5,400 people in Canada from India who were settled here. They were so upset. Within 6 months of this incident, they all went back because they wanted their freedom. They wanted their own country. They felt because of this incident, they did not belong in Canada. So they went back to India to fight for their freedom. So basically, Indian freedom started from Komagata Maru. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today here on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It is part of the Canadian culture that we acknowledge what the First Nations people did for us, and all the people coming to Canada, they belong only because of the First Nations. Things that we would like people to remember about Komagata Maru is that it does not happen again. And only way we could recognize, I know the Canadian government has apologized, I know that BC government has apologized. Apologies don't mean anything if the incident that happens or incidents like that keep happening again and again. So it's one way of remembering these is putting these artifacts or these stories in the museums. And those museums should be available, or they should be accessible to everybody, not just this culture, Komagata Maru incident, but all cultures that are in Canada and they came from other nations. So First Nations, first we have to understand their culture because they are the one who were here first, and we have to recognize that, and we can bring our cultures no matter which part of the world you're from, and all those cultures should have a place in a common museum where all Canadians can go and learn about each individual country, each individual nation, and each individual incident that took place that was not easy for those people, be it Chinese people for their head tax, be it Japanese people, be it Komagata Maru, or many other nations that suffered when they came over in Canada. So apologies, Canadian government just can't keep apologizing for everything. What they can do is that these things do not happen again and again. And for the future generation, we need them to learn these stories. Only way to learn these stories is through the books, through the documentaries, and through actual artifacts in the museums. That's where Canadian Heritage Center comes in, and Museum of Migration. We want to keep those stories. We want to put those stories into the museum where they are accessible for everybody, no matter where you're from. We are at a place where 110 years ago, Komagata Maru ship was actually here, but the 376 passengers were unable to land, or they were denied entry to Canadian land here in Broad Inlet. So this is a place now. It looks very nice, but we were actually where we are standing right now is actually it was water at the time. So just behind us there was ship idle, sitting without food. The importance of this memorial here, monument here at Broad Inlet, representing the injustices suffered for the Komagata Maru passengers. It was very important for the Canadian government to fund and put this memorial monument at the place where actually the incident took place. So for the future generation, kids from schools, they come over and they take a look at the names of the passengers that were on the ship. It's very important that they actually see what happened 110 years ago. So it's very important for the generation and future generation, and for Canadian people who did not know anything about this incident.
Are there any other ways that you engage the younger generation about the importance of Komagata Maru?
Well, the young generation, now that we are living in a digital world, we tried for many years, for over 30 years, trying to make the future generation or young generation understand what Komagata Maru was. But as soon as the Canadian Canada Post let a Canada Post stamp on Komagata Maru, it was a digital era, and the future generation, just from the internet, they suddenly realized what the incident was. So digital world stamp being released, story on Komagata Maru being on the internet. That's how we actually teach our future generation. Documentaries through the museum, and they need to be involved. They need to be told where our pioneer forefathers came from. Doesn't matter where, which country, which heritage, which culture you're from. Just tell your family story, where you came from and where your grandfather and your father came from.
Who has provided official apologies?
Official apology was provided by Canadian government in the Parliament in Ottawa in 2016. In 2014, BC government did the apology in BC legislation. So there were two apologies from federal government and the provincial governments. They happened, apologies were true and from heart. How long it took them to apologize, that's what we have a problem with, because we didn't have to be telling them that injustice has happened. Injustice had happened for more than 100 years ago, and the Canadian government did not take action. And finally, we are happy with the apology, but we still need to have these incidents not repeat again.
And what motivates you to be involved with the Komagata Maru Heritage Foundation?
Well, I've been involved with the Komagata Maru Heritage Foundation for over 30 years now. And when we started, it was not very well known incident. So our focus was just to make the public aware what had happened. And there were lots of injustice. Even I would get calls, why are you, racist calls, why are you pushing this? Why it happened 70 years ago, it happened 80 years ago. So we still had to go through those kind of racial calls, but now we have changed. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and we are hopefully living in a better Canada and future Canada.
So, regarding your time as the president of Pacific Canada Heritage Centre Museum of Migration Society and your current relationship with it, what motivates you to be involved with what we call PCHC?
Well, involving with PCHC is, a group of us got gathered together from different communities, and what we wanted was, we wanted a museum, that actual museum, that where all these communities can tell their stories. And being a past president of this society, it's very pleasurable that where we have gone in the last 15 years, where we come from and where we are, and we are telling these stories on digital and on paper media. So we need to tell these stories, but our future goal is still having the museum for all, not one particular fraction of the people of Canada, but it's all people coming to Canada from no matter where you came from. We have Pier 21 in Halifax, where all the people who came from Europe, they have a museum. Why not have a museum where all the people came to Canada, no matter where from? So in Vancouver would be the perfect place for that kind of museum, rather than have a museum, little museum for Chinese, another museum for South Asian, another museum for any different cultural people. Have a museum for everybody, where everybody can go and learn these stories. And that's why we wanted to be involved. That's why these different communities got involved. And I think that is our future. No sense having a museum for one particular, where it's only going to be sitting in 500 square feet and just telling that story. So basically a museum like that all you're doing is catering to that community, only those people are going to go there. But if you are actually thinking about Canada, you want to teach Canadian story, Canadian history, you have to go to a museum where all those stories, all that history could be reached by our younger generation, our students on field trips. That's where we need to actually build on. It's going to take time, but that's what we want to do. We need to tell these stories depending on what age group you're in. Grade 5 could be just understanding where these people came from and what their background was, what country they were from, and how were they in Canada at the time, and what kind of education they were getting, and what kind of education we are getting here in Canada. So different age group, we would like to cater to them of what they understand. We don't have to have a 10-page story for grade 5. But if you are doing a social study course for grade 11, then you go a little bit more in deeper and give more details. So basically, we want to cater to the future generation at their age. It's very important. I did a little session with kindergarten kids. So the questions they were asking, they had no idea who I was, what I was representing. All they wanted to ask was simple questions. Okay, where did they come from? Did my grandfather come from there? That kind of stuff. So basically, those questions for the little kids are very, very simple. And we could say, you're from India, you're from China, we're from Africa. So just making them understand that there's other people other than what you look like. There's different people, different way they come from, different way they live. So different stories for young kids who are 5 years old, 10 years old, and going to universities. This is a stamp that was released in Parliament in Ottawa in 2016 by the Prime Minister. And the history of that was putting a stamp by Canada Post. Putting a stamp by Canada Post that actually brought the incident of Komagata Maru to international level. It was an international stamp, and it went all across the world, and every country wanted to know what Komagata Maru was. So from future generation, digital world, as soon as the stamp was released, we actually put 376 stamps that were put out, one for each passenger. And those 376 in the digital world, as soon as Canada Post put it online, they were sold within 4 hours. We had no imagination. Canada Post was actually worried that they wouldn't be sold. So our foundation actually said, if they are not sold, we will buy them all. So unfortunately, fortunately, they were all sold. So as soon as Canada Post realized, then they phoned me, hey, would you like to keep some? So I was able to have 50 of them. So those 50 stamps I have given to 5 prime ministers, 3 chief ministers, or state level heads. So it's very important for these. That's one way of, if you give these stamps to the most powerful person in the country, then he's going to actually share that story with somebody. So that's how this stamp is very important, and it brought our story a focus.
Did it lead to an apology?
Yes. And of course, all 3 opposition parties and the party that was in power in 2014, we wanted to have an apology in 2014, but they did not apologize. So we wanted them to apologize, even though they passed in the parliament they were going to apologize. They said, no, we're not going to apologize. So as soon as the stamp was released and the government thought, hey, now is the time to apologize. So apology happened in 2016. The stamp was released in 2014. The public demand of the history, so basically through the stamp, it became international. So Canada understood it is an international story. Before they were thinking, hey, it's the Indian story, it's not a Canadian story. So they finally realized it was a Canadian story and a Canadian history. So they apologized.